Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a supernatural horror film, The Others. Spoiler ahead, watch out and take care. Grace and her 2 children lived in a mansion on an island in Britain, 1945. When the Second World War was coming to an end, she's looking forward to her husband's coming back from battle. Resilient and strong-minded, Grace is a faithful Christian, who is convinced in everything the Bible says, and often reads it aloud with her children. Her son Nicholas believes in the Bible stories Mom tells, whereas her daughter Anne often questions them. Time passes day by day, as Grace anxiously waits for her husband to be back from the front. One morning, however, Grace wakes up with a scream, and finds everything is different from before. The servants in the mansion are all missing. Stepping out, Grace finds herself covered in heavy mist, and nothing is visible. Grace writes to the newspaper to post an ad hiring servants. To her surprise, she gets too quick a response. 3 people come to apply for the job the next morning. They are the housekeeper, the gardener, and the nanny. The housekeeper says they are honest and diligent, and have been working together for many years. Although the nanny is dumb, the other 2 seem nice, so Grace accepts them all. She tells the servants in particular that the children are sunlight sensitive, so they must close the curtains, as well as the door after them. Grace is going to show them around the mansion. The housekeeper tells her no need to do so. But before explaining the reason for that, she swallows back her words. At breakfast in the morning, Anne asks the housekeeper if she will leave them one day without even saying goodbye, as what the previous servants did. The housekeeper asks her what the matter was. Anne answers her mom was mad that day. Nicholas stops Anne from talking about the incident. The topic ends up with their quarrel. Ever since the arrival of the new servants, many weird things begin to happen to the family. One day, Grace discovers her letter for the ad hasn't been delivered to the newspaper yet, which means the 3 servants came to work for them, without knowing the ad at all. The housekeeper explains that they just passed by this luxury mansion, and tried their luck. Wearing a mysterious smile, the housekeeper tells further they actually had been working in this mansion many years before. They miss the happy time spent here, so they are back again. It sounds reasonable, and Grace agrees to hire them, although she's puzzled. Grace asks the housekeeper if the nanny was born a mute. She simply replies no, and leaves in a hurry for her work. One day, Grace hears a boy crying, and she hurries to the children's room, but only find her son writing and her daughter reading quietly. Anne tells Mom it is a boy named Victor, who was crying. His family are moving in to join them, but Victor doesn't like the place, so he cried. Grace thinks Anne is daydreaming. She scolds her, telling her she should not have said what's not true. At night, Anne wakes Nicholas up and tells him Victor is in the room, and pulls open the curtain. Nicholas dares not open his eyes and see. To make Nicholas believe what she said, she asks Victor to touch his face, and Nicholas screams when Victor touches him. Because of that, Grace punishes Anne to recite the Bible for her lying. Anne insists that she saw Victor. She didn't lie. Grace punishes her to continue reciting the Bible. After a while, Grace hears loud noises coming from upstairs. Annoyed, she is going to scold the servants for that. Before she sees through the window, they are chatting in the yard instead. When Grace goes upstairs to check, Anne refuses to tell her because she's afraid of her punishment again. Grace begs Anne to tell her what she saw. Anne tells her that someone was searching for something in the storage. She has turned everything over, but finds nothing. Anne draws whom she has seen in the past days. They are the little boy Victor and his parents, and a psychic as well. This time Grace believes there must be some intruders in the mansion. Picking up a gun, she asks the servants to search every corner with her. However, they find no intruder, but an album instead from a closet. All the people in the album were closing their eyes, as if they were asleep. The housekeeper tells Grace that they are portraits of dead people. It was popular photographing the deceased in the last century, in the hope of their souls rising to the paradise. Grace asks the housekeeper to throw away the album immediately. The housekeeper then says they are among the 15 servants hired by a big family, who lived in this mansion long before, but tuberculosis finished the family off. They 3 have been missing this mansion all along, so they are back now. Grace asks again if the nanny was born mute. The housekeeper simply answers, she became mute all of a sudden for a reason unknown. Grace suspects that she must have been mentally stimulated by some terrible incident, and has since become mute. While Annie falls asleep, Grace enters her bedroom. Though strong and resilient as she looks, overwhelmed by the weird things happened, her never-returning husband, and her friction with Anne, Grace is fragile at heart, lonely and exhausted. She lies gently over her daughter, and whispers in sorrow her apology for being tough to Anne. One evening, Grace hears someone playing the piano. She opens the door, but finds nobody. Then the door is pushed against her. When she pushes back, the door is suddenly slammed, and she is hit onto the floor. Completely convinced of the intruders, she wonders if they are souls not at rest. The housekeeper tells her there exists the other world. Sometimes the world of the living gets mixed up with the world of the dead, at which time they can feel the existence of each other. Regardless of the heavy mist, Grace goes out to ask the priest for help. In the yard, the gardener is piling the falling leaves to cover something. Seeing Grace going far, he points at the 3 piles of leaves, and asks the housekeeper when to reveal the truth to Grace. The housekeeper says it will be very soon. Deep into the grove, Grace gets lost in the heavier mist. She hears footsteps, and sees a vague figure of a man approaching near. It turns out to be her husband Charles, whom she's been waiting for so long. They hold each other. Grace bursts into tears. Caressing his face, she tells Charles she is desperate, as people all say he is dead. She prays every night for God to bring him back to her. Charles says he was just lost, and looking for the way home all along. However, there is no happily ever after. Charles is so sick that he lies in bed all day, without playing with the children or eating in the dining room. He simply stares out of the window, which depresses Grace a lot. Once again, Grace doesn't believe what Anne said about the intruders, and they quarrel. Anne puffs to show her dissatisfaction. Grace yells at her to stop puffing, and drives her out in a rage. The housekeeper consoles Anne, who is crying after being punished. She says she believes Anne's words, and she's seen the intruders too. But is not the time yet to tell the truth to her mom, as there are things her mom doesn't want to hear, but sooner or later, she'll see the intruders, and everything will be different. Anne asks how, and the housekeeper answers she'll see soon. To smooth frictions over, Grace helps Anne try on the new evening dress with a veil. Anne loves her new dress so much that she doesn't want to put it off. When Grace urges her again, she finds Anne's hands become wrinkled, and her face is an old woman's, with wide open but blind eyes.
What's the matter?
Horrified by that, Grace grabs her neck, and rocks her fiercely. Grace pulls the veil off Anne, but finds Anne is back to herself again. Frightened by her mom, Anne runs to the housekeeper for help, screaming her mom is evil, and wants to kill her and all of them. Standing there, Grace trembles all over. When Anne leaves her dad after seeking comfort from him, Grace comes in. Charles, who has kept silent all along, opens his mouth. He asks Grace what she did to the children that day. Grace answers she didn't know what happened that day. All she knew was when she woke up, she found the servants all missing in one night. She says though she is tough with the children, she loves them, and is willing to die for them. In tremendous grief, Charles stands up, and says he just came home to say goodbye, and he is leaving for the front again. Falling apart, Grace yells at him the war was over, challenging him why he would rather choose to go and fight that stupid war, than stay with the family like others did. She loved him, and had been alone longing for his coming back for so long. Heartbroken, tears come down Charles' face. The next morning, Grace wakes up and finds Charles is gone. Wandering in the lonely yard always covered in heavy mist, thinking of her husband's leaving, Grace feels lost, and cut off from the world. On one morning, the children wake up, and find all the curtains are missing. Afraid of light, they are trembling. Grace shouts at the servants, but they all say they did not remove the curtains. The housekeeper says maybe the daylight would not hurt the children. They were allergic to sunlight before, but the condition could have cleared up now. The gardener agrees by saying that the housekeeper used to suffer from arthritis, but one day she recovered, so maybe everything is all right now. In a rage, Grace points her gun toward the servants, and drives them away. Walking out of the house, the servants agree it is time to reveal the truth to Grace. At night, Rebel Anne encourages her brother to jump out of the window, and come to the grove to look for Dad. On the way, they find 3 tombs, which the 3 servants had intentionally covered with piles of leaves. Brave Anne comes close, and sees the housekeeper's name carved on one tombstone. Turning around, they see the 3 servants approaching. Anne cries to her brother to run away from the ghosts, and they run into the house. Meanwhile, Grace finds a portrait of dead people, when she searches for the curtains. She looks at it, and is shocked to find it's the portrait of the 3 servants. Knowing they were dead long ago, Grace covers her mouth. Hearing the children screaming, Grace takes her gun to rescue them. She asks the children to hide inside the room. While the three servants are walking step by step toward the house, she fires at the ground, but the servants seem not afraid. They keep walking toward her and tell Grace not to trouble herself, as tuberculosis finished them off more than half a century ago. Grace throws off her gun, runs into the house, and locks the door. The housekeeper continues through the door that they've been trying to convince her of her real condition and how the dead and the alive live in harmony with each other. Startled, Grace sits on the stairs and begs the dead servants to leave them in peace. But the housekeeper says even suppose they do leave them, the intruders won't. The gardener adds that it is the intruders who removed the curtains and made the noises, and now the intruders are in this house. The two children who are hiding in the wardrobe hear a voice asking them to follow her. They see an old woman opens the wardrobe door. Hearing the children screaming, Grace stared upstairs in a panic, and the housekeeper tells her the intruders are already here. There's nothing they can do to prevent the intruders, but to have a conversation with them. Grace prays for God's blessing as she goes upstairs in terror. She opens the door and sees a group of people sitting around the table. One of them is an old white-haired woman with wide-open but blind eyes, who seems to be the psychic Anne has drawn. The psychic asks Anne Nicholas what happened here, what Mom did to them. Anne looks at Mom with her frightened eyes, and whispers the incident in the psychic's ear. The psychic draws on the paper while listening, and shows her drawing to the old man, who sits beside her. The old man says it seems what she drew is an incident relating to a pillow. Then the white-haired psychic understands what happened. She told the children their mom killed them with a pillow, and asked them why they are still here since they were dead. Anne can't believe that. She says Mom didn't kill them. They're not dead. Grace angrily shakes the table and tears the paper into pieces. However, the other people who sit around the table cannot see Grace and her children. All they can see is the shaking table and the pieces of torn paper. The hostess of the mansion tells her husband emotionally that she can't bear the terror. She won't live here anymore because the specters here do not welcome them. The house is haunted by that mad woman who killed her two children with a pillow, and she shot herself dead with a gun. And their poor son Victor often sees their wandering souls. It is too dangerous to live here. They must move right now. And the host promises they will move tomorrow. Grace holds her two frightened children into her arms. She murmurs that at first she couldn't understand why the pillow was in her hands, but then she knew she killed her children. She remembers right now she put the rifle to her forehead and pulled the trigger, but then it seemed nothing had happened, except that all the servants were missing in one night. Ever since then, outside the house, it had been covered with heavy mist all along. But every day, her two children played and laughed beside her. Grace then asks herself what's the meaning for them, and where they should go. The housekeeper says that the nanny asked the same questions when she knew they three were all dead. Then she shut her mouth and never spoke again. They had been wishing to tell her the truth all along, but dared not to disturb her. The housekeeper continues that the intruders are moving out, but others will come. Sometimes the humans sense them, other times not. So they have to learn how to get along with the humans. And finally, the children understand that they have been into the other world, and they are not afraid of the sunlight anymore. Outside the window, the beautiful sunshine dispels the mist. Victor and his family are driving away. The for sale sign is hung on the door. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Peace out.